of monsters in Crater Lake, the 1909 Portland poltergeist outbreak, Bigfoot seen in Tillamook. Well, we've discovered yet another mystery here. Let's take a look. Experts seem to agree that UFO sightings center around certain areas for a few years, and then the focus moves on to new places. Over the last few years, the hottest spot for UFOs seemed to be Mexico, where, according to UFO magazine, thousands of sightings were reported, and some were caught on film and video by astonished onlookers. Now it appears that the best place to spot a UFO might be Central Oregon. So far this year, we've heard of many sightings there. Volcanoes are an attraction for UFOs, according to researchers. They hypothesize that the ships in some way use the Earth's geothermal energy, which remains in local hotspots, long after the volcano cools. Central Mexico and Central Oregon have had a great deal of relatively recent volcanic activity. The landscape of America's Northwest is dominated by many solitary volcanic peaks over 10,000 feet. In Central Oregon, several of these majestic mountains are clustered together. It is also the part of the range that underwent the most recent volcanic activity. And it is this area around the peaks called the Three Sisters that has reported the largest amount of recent UFO sightings. In the 1840s, these three volcanic mountains were named Faith, Hope, and Charity by the local Methodist camp. They later became known collectively as the Three Sisters. The U.S. Forest Service has designated the vast remote area the Three Sisters Wilderness Area. Open only to hikers, it's a place that has very little human disturbance. Most commonly, UFO reports involve a single passing or hovering ship in the air. But we were recently contacted by a backpacker who had the incredible experience of seeing several ships together on the ground. Now here is her amazing story.
Well, it was spring, and it was just starting to warm up, and I thought I'd take a hike for a couple of days out in the Three Sisters. I hiked in about 3 hours, and I got to a place where there were some great rock formations. I thought I'd camp there so I could hike around in the rocks in the next morning. I put my tent up on this kind of butte where I had this fantastic view. Then, I don't know, I think it was about 3 in the morning, I woke up because there was this bright light shining in through the tent. It was really, really weird. I couldn't imagine what it could be. I looked outside and I couldn't believe it. Down below, at the base of those huge rocks, I saw 3 circular objects. They were really bright, lighting up the whole area. It was the strangest thing I ever saw. I remember thinking, nobody is ever going to believe this. Then I saw a 4th one, and it actually was in the air, kind of hovering, and it started to land with the other ones. I was totally amazed. I started to feel very strange, like very weak all of a sudden. I'm not sure what happened then. All I know is I woke up outside the tent on the ground. I looked down there, and there was nothing anywhere. I never sleepwalked in my life. I knew what I'd seen was real. I had to go down there and look around. There weren't that many trees in there with all the rocks, but the ones that were there were all charred. And there were these powdery ashes scattered around. I'm not one of those people that goes looking around for UFOs, but I'm convinced that this was something from another world.
But the story doesn't end there. Only days later, photographs and videos were taken in the area showing UFOs strikingly similar to those described by Karen. This shot was snapped by a local woman from her back porch. You can see two of the Three Sisters peaks in the background. And this photo was taken by a tourist as he stood at a viewpoint area overlooking Bend. And this dramatic picture was captured on the night of May the 6th near the town of Sisters, Oregon. Extraordinary. But possibly the most interesting of all is this home video footage shot by a Los Angeles tourist, Jeff Kendall. When it's played back in slow motion, it's quite incredible. Are UFOs now focusing on Oregon because they have work to do there? Or is it just trendy for now? Either way, Oregonians keep a close eye on the sky. Or heard about UFOs. There's still an insatiable appetite to learn more. As Susan explores these extraterrestrial encounters, maybe we'll get one step closer to understanding these visitors from outer space.
On June 24, 1947, an American pilot described some unusual objects in the sky he had seen as saucers flying, labeling UFOs as flying saucers ever since. Since man's first step towards exploring space, we have come a long way to accepting that other life forms do exist in the universe, and UFOs have indeed been seen in different shapes and sizes.
We're all familiar with Steven Spielberg's work in such films as E.T. and Close Encounters of the Third Kind. These films and others have brought an all-new perspective to the relationship between humans and aliens.
Suddenly, aliens are not regarded as Earth's arch enemies, but beings who are as curious about us as we are about them.
For millions of people all over the world who've had some kind of experience involving UFOs, certain terminology has been used to describe these experiences.
Close encounters of a first kind is merely the sighting of a phenomena where there is no physical contact. When vegetation is affected, tree branches broken, animals frightened, or electricity doused, close encounter of a second kind comes in effect. In cases where witnesses have actually seen aliens without communicating or coming in direct contact with them, close encounter of a third kind is experienced. In dealing with close encounters of a fourth kind, things get a little more complicated. These encounters involve the interaction between aliens and Earthlings, where witnesses claim to have met, talked to, traveled in company with, or even been abducted by creatures not from this world. The witness fully remembers what took place. There is no memory block, no forgotten time lapses, an experience that is as real as any normal daily event. The distinction comes in where another witness has had the full experience but doesn't remember it immediately. A disturbing fact if you find you suddenly have memory flashes of an encounter which had taken place days, months, or even years before. Many people have gone under hypnosis to help put in perspective the memories that they had wiped out from their consciousness. Sometimes these experiences are disturbing and even painful, but most of the time they are interesting and revealing, putting us one step forward in our quest for knowledge.
With so much left to classify and to discover, who knows? Maybe close encounters of a fifth kind will be the term used for Earthlings cohabitating with beings from another world.
Pathologists revealed the worst-case scenario.
His mouth. So for a first-hand account of an alien abduction, we went to a man who has been abducted many times and has written best-selling books as a result.
On December the 26th, 1985, in the middle of the night, I found myself waking up
in the presence of some extremely strange figures with huge dark eyes, and I could not get out of the nightmare. Ultimately, I was forced to conclude something unknown had happened. I had been in the presence of the unknown on that night.
This was the first in a series of encounters with what Whitley Strieber describes as undeniably real, fierce, and quite amazing creatures who are visiting Earth. Taken out of his cabin and into a wooded area, Whitley claims these humanoids took him to the interior of a UFO.
I woke up in a little round, rather messy room that was stuffy and full of these very rapidly moving apparitions, I would call them. And with an automatic voice that kept repeating, "What can we do to help you stop screaming?" I remember something being fired into the side of my head that made a flash in my eyes and left an injury that I felt later, a red swollen place on my temple. And it hurt. It hurt like, you know, it was achy, like it was sore. I said, "You have no right," at one point, and they said, "We do have a right."
Strieber describes his emotion during the situation as terror, an unbelievable terror he had never experienced before in his life.
Subsequent to the experience, I was equally frightened because I thought that I had some sort of disease that had caused a spectacularly vivid hallucination.
Strieber eventually underwent a series of psychological tests, neurological tests, and even a polygraph examination. It was concluded that there was nothing wrong with him physically or mentally, and he passed the polygraph. Other encounters followed. He became less frightened of them over the years and eventually came to think of these experiences as fascinating adventures, a chance to see a completely different spectrum of human understanding, and even beyond that.
It's fascinating. I realized after the first 3 or 4 years that no matter how startling it got, that I obviously was not being hurt. So I started to relax and enjoy it because, boy, I mean, what a trip. It's a fabulous trip.
The aliens themselves, he says, vary from the bizarre-looking to ones who seem to be quite human in everything, except for their personal effect and demeanor.
The one I see the most is a long, strikingly thin face and big black eyes and stares into you with those eyes, and it feels like a hurricane blowing into your soul when it happens. It's a very powerful experience.
The impression most of us have of aliens are those of a higher intelligence. Could it be that these beings have as much to learn as we do?
My observation of them is that they don't have higher intelligence than we do. I've seen them make plenty of mistakes. I've seen them get confused. I do think that they have a level of mind that we don't have. I think that they can see beyond time and that they can manipulate their relationship to physical reality differently from the way we can.
Strieber received thousands of letters from people all over the world. The startling fact is that the detailed descriptions of their encounters with aliens were similar.
I'm sure that every night and day all over the world this is happening to more and more people.
Physical evidence of these visits from the aliens come in the form of markings on their bodies.
I have a little shadow in my finger which came there when I was about age 9. I have only the dimmest memories of a very violent and noisy experience in which it happened.
In a culture of denial where anything outside a human understanding is dismissed as normal or improbable, Strieber's claims are viewed with skepticism.
I think that skepticism is healthy. I don't think that it's appropriate to say a thing is true or untrue.
Strieber claims that at the moment there are about 2 to 2.5 million people in this country who've had face-to-face encounters. It's a hard pill for some of these skeptics to swallow.
In 1963, Carl Sagan wrote an essay saying that we'd probably be visited by aliens on the average of every 10,000 years. So why not now? It doesn't seem at all improbable to me. I don't know what the big, all the screaming about it can't be possibly true, it can't be true is. It's very strange. Why wouldn't it be true? The universe is such a huge place.
One question remains. Why don't these aliens make a public appearance?
Eventually it'll reach a critical point where enough people have been acclimatized so that as a species we will basically be able to handle it. And if I know the visitors they will appear publicly about 1 second after that moment is reached.
Fear obviously plays a big role in our expectancies of these creatures. If they come here to harm us, how could we defend ourselves? If they come here in friendship, how would we know?
They seem to want us to come into contact and resensitize ourselves to our souls and to begin to see the world in a broader way. I think they might be looking for a companion. I don't know what they are. We may not even be able to put into words what they are. We may not have the language to explain it.
One fact remains. As Whitley Strieber wrote in his book, Breakthrough, The Next Step, whatever it is, it's something outside of human beings, not something human minds can understand.
UFO cover-ups and even alien abductions. Now, we have uncovered an even more bizarre twist to the category. It seems there are a group of people numbering in the thousands who claim to be from other worlds, but for the time being reside on this planet. It certainly raises a question that decades ago was simply a joke. Could your neighbor be an alien?
Earth is the third smallest planet in the solar system, ruled by what is considered at best a medium-sized sun. So what makes it so special? What actually sets Earth apart from the other planets in the solar system is that 70% of the Earth's surface is covered with water. Now that makes Earth a virtual oasis in the vast cold desert we call space. Perhaps this could explain all the UFO activity recorded throughout history. Millions of light years separate us from what could be termed possible life-bearing systems. Earth is like a magnet, drawing life forms from all over the universe. Although extraterrestrials are seldom thought of as human, we discovered two people who claim to be just that, ET souls in human bodies, souls who came to Earth with a higher purpose.
Our soul resonates and emulates from the constellation of Taurus, which is the Pleiades, the seven sister star region, and we work directly from the office of the Christ, the Brotherhood of Melchizedek, to aid in the resurrection of the consciousness awakening of mankind.
The ET phenomenon is actually a spiritual experience in that the extraterrestrials are here to help the planet develop consciousness.
Scott Mindleker once felt lost and alone in this city by the bay, but that was the past. He now knows why he felt that way, and his discovery led him to write a book whose ideas changed his life and the life of millions.
I wrote this book basically for two reasons. The first is that there are millions of wanderers or extraterrestrial souls living on Earth who don't know that they are extraterrestrial souls. They felt different all their lives, and they couldn't make sense of it. And the second reason is that the UFO phenomenon, as we see it shown in the media today, is generally slanted towards fear. ET souls are souls that are not native to Earth. Generally, they are hundreds of thousands or millions of years older than consciousness on Earth. So these souls choose to come to Earth for one or many lifetimes, ultimately to be of service, which means to offer what they can through their higher consciousness, generally means love and wisdom and kindness. The main group, however, of extraterrestrials are wanderers, and in my opinion, there are 70 to 100 million extraterrestrial souls living on Earth now, the majority of whom don't know it.
Besides wanderers, there are walk-ins. We talked with Aurea, a woman who calls herself a walk-in. A walk-in is a being that had a soul exchange with a person born here on Earth.
In this particular instance, Catherine, the former self, was on a vacation in the high Austrian Alps, which is an incredibly high and pure region. While there on a vacation, she had a death experience where the physiological body became dead, if you will, though death is, again, a perception. But the body was clinically dead for 27 minutes. It was in that time that her soul was led out by her guides and angels as my soul transferred into the body again being sent directly by the Lord God Most High to serve humankind. Our soul emanates from the Pleiades, which is the seven sister star region in the constellation of Taurus. We are, by your Earth standards, Pleiadian, extraterrestrial in form, although we house a physical body as you or anyone else upon the planet does.
On display were sculptures Aria did of Pleiadians and also of biblical figures who once walked the earth with what Aria calls Christed energy. She claims that Catherine had no such skills, for all the sculpting has occurred after the soul transference. One of the questions we wanted to know was whether one would know if they or someone they knew was either a walk-in or a wanderer.
In the book, actually, and in the newsletter, I offer the Sleeping Wanderers quiz. There are 12 indications so a person can know whether they are or are not an extraterrestrial soul. Basically, from childhood, there's the experience of differentness, not belonging, not fitting in. These people generally come from loving, supportive families. As children, sometimes they looked up to the night sky and said, "Take me home."
We, as with all of the ascended beings, read the intent of the soul within each and every individual. You see, the soul was divinely designed to be God at the core and at the purest of its elements. And so it is our gift that when we come upon someone that is being less than truthful or that is clouded with deceit, it is an instantaneous energy transmission. So we may read this very easily.
Where does one find these star souls? Well, according to Scott, they are everywhere. To our pleasant surprise, one person overheard us during the interview and felt an immediate connection.
I couldn't understand it when people used to try to pick fights with me because I had red hair. Today, more than ever, I can't understand it because of the upsurge in violent behavior, especially with young people. I felt that a lot of my childhood experiences were out of the ordinary. I used to hear what they call astral music. When I'd wake up on a Saturday morning, I would hear like distant trumpets and voices and things like that.
While there is no absolute way to prove that walk-ins and wanderers are actually what they say they are, I can tell you after talking with these people, they believe who and what they are. But one thing is certain, Aria and Scott have never met, and yet they both claim to have come here for the same reason.
Earth is at a special time now. It's actually a crisis period where the planet as a whole, collectively and individually, has the choice, working together or splitting apart. The extraterrestrials are basically here as a little bit of booster of love and light, kindness, compassion, a little bit of clarity and wisdom to help the people around them who really want to grow and want to help this society.
The Earth is going through high and dramatic changes. All of life is eternal, and mankind must begin to go within and stop seeking outside of himself for answers which are clearly within the 7 chakras, or the spiritual energy centers of the body. Within these energy centers, all answers lie within cellular memory, within genetical codes. And it is by seeking from within that mankind cannot be deceived.
Where time stands still.
For decades now, science fiction has mystified us with intriguing stories of time, space, and the universe beyond. And we have witnessed many of yesterday's fantasies becoming realities of the present.
I think that some of the ideas we see in science fiction today will become a reality, but the history of science fiction is one of anticipating developments that eventually turn out to be true.
One concept that is still baffling and elusive is time travel. Will we be able to go into the future or into the past? Can we slip through a crack in time to another place on our globe or even to another planet? Well, not only do many believe so, but there are incredible stories, some well documented, of people who already claim to have experienced time travel. On a clear, cool night in 1968, Antonio Larrego and his wife Maria were driving from their home in Buenos Aires, Argentina, to attend a family reunion. As they made a turn, they came face to face with an enormous bank of fog. An eerie dense mist surrounded their car. Then everything went black. As quickly as the darkness had descended, the sunlight burst out of the sky, and they found themselves somewhere else, in a place they had never seen before. Antonio tried to get his bearings. He was astonished to discover they were in Mexico City. The couple were dazed and confused. How could they be transported to another country? Maria looked down at her watch. It had completely stopped. So had Antonio's pocket watch. They later discovered that 48 hours had passed since they disappeared in the fog 4,000 miles away. The couple was forced to take a flight home. Later, they were told others had witnessed the fog in the same area. What happened to Antonio and Maria Larrego during those 48 hours is, and perhaps will always remain, a mystery. Could they have fallen victim to a black hole in time, or a phenomenon known as a wormhole?
A wormhole would be a way of connecting two places in the universe through this other dimension.
Many people think North America has its own version of a black hole. It exists on a lonely desert road outside of Barstow, California.
You're probably talking about the phenomena on the freeway here and some of the other roads. It's basically, they'll be driving down the road and they'll think an hour has passed. They'll look down and it's only 5 minutes, or they'll get the reverse of that. They'll think that only 5 minutes has gone by and it's actually been an hour.
We asked Kelly Roberts to tell us about her story when she experienced the black hole phenomenon.
I was driving out to Las Vegas to see clients for the weekend from Friday through Sunday. And I had a spot in Barstow that I normally stop for gasoline and get some lunch. As I was coming back onto the freeway from that exit, looking at the clock on the dashboard, it was just shortly after 3, like 3:06 or something around there. And I had my soda over here in the holder that was attached to the door, and I reached over and took a sip of that. I was not quite on the freeway yet, and I reached down to the seat, and I had a pack of cigarettes down here. I took a cigarette and lit the cigarette, looked back at the clock, which only a few seconds, as far as I know, had transpired. And there was literally an hour had passed. It was now 4:02.
Kelly's first thought was that her clock was broken. So she did what most people would do in that situation.
I reached over and I hit the dashboard, thinking that it would prove that the clock was broken, and it didn't change anything. So then I looked at my wristwatch, and it was the same time as what my clock on the car said.
What happened next would give Kelly one of the biggest scares of her life.
It was like waking up and all of a sudden being in the midst of traffic that's moving at 80 miles an hour.
The effect of the time warp was so strong that Kelly, like many time warp victims, remained disoriented.
They feel disoriented, especially right afterwards. It's sort of like coming out of a dream is how they've described it to me.
Once I got to Vegas, I parked at the hotel, got my bags out of the trunk, and walked to the door, and I could see the front desk. All I had to do was walk straight down the hallway to the front desk. For some reason, the next thing I knew, I was in another part of the building that was totally separate from where the front desk was. The disorientation was overwhelming. It was like a similar type feeling when you wake up and you're exhausted. You can't even think of what day it is.
Kelly is not the only one who experienced something strange on that long, lonely road to Las Vegas.
Well, one was a Roman Catholic priest. One was a CPA. I believe one was a doctor.
I have to admit that there are mysteries that are unexplained on the Earth and in the universe. And we have to be careful not to be gullible, because it's very easy to be fooled by people or by nature. But I also want to caution my fellow scientists not to just automatically dismiss anything simply because it doesn't fit into our present understanding.
Well, there's a lot of things that are unexplainable.
Unexplainable indeed. So be careful when you travel that next unknown road. It may look like an ordinary road, but it just might take you to a place or a time you're not expecting to go.
The
may be both. In increasing numbers in the skies over the United States and Mexico, people have been witnessing some amazingly unusual UFO activity. But unlike other UFOs, which are commonly considered alien spaceships, these gigantic flying entities actually seem to be alive.
Over the years, the UFO phenomenon has been the subject of great intrigue and even greater ridicule. Eyewitness reports of flying saucers, unexplained lights in the sky, and claims of alien abduction are often dismissed as either the delusional imaginings of well-meaning citizens or hoaxes made up by individuals looking for their 15 minutes. When filmmaker Jose Escamilla claimed he had not only captured hundreds of UFOs on videotape, but that the tape showed images unlike anything ever before photographed, everyone assumed because of his film background, the footage was doctored. But Jose denies such accusations and, in fact, is asking for help in trying to identify just exactly what it is he's discovered.
I think it's important that we should all collectively try to gather as much evidence about the subject that we're talking about and try to find out what it is. Can you imagine? I mean, it's like, here we have a creature, perhaps, or an entity that is among us, and it might have been here all along. And we need to study this type of phenomena, you know? It's important.
The decidedly bizarre phenomena are something Jose and his wife Karen saw in a home video they were watching one day.
That there are objects flying around in this tape that we thought at first were bugs flying at high velocities and, you know, close to the camera lens. But after we started doing research and scanning the tapes, we found that these objects are, in fact, not bugs or birds, but are something else. It turns out these things were objects that were flying around like fish swim in the sea.
Jose and Karen called their discovery rods due to their long, cylindrical, rod-like shapes.
These objects are anywhere from 4 inches in length up to 100 feet in length or more and travel at high velocities.
But it's not their varied sizes and amazing speed that are the most unusual aspects of these UFOs. The Escamillas have reason to believe these mysterious entities are organic.
I think they are alive, yeah. Every indication, the way they move through the air, I mean, they're not, I know they're not metallic or mechanical, and they move like animals. I mean, they look like fish. So this gives us an indication that these things are living.
This image was captured by Jeff Ferris, who has a theory about what these strange phantoms are and why they've gone unnoticed up until now.
As goofy as it sounds, I want to say they're interdimensional insects, or whatever you'd want to label them at. Sometimes they appear to go into the ground and come out of the ground. Sometimes they just appear suddenly out of nowhere.
Such incredible claims warranted further investigation, so I took a sample of the rod footage to video analyst Jim Delatoso, who in the past has used his expertise to expose more than a few UFO hoaxes.
We've worked on classified projects and imaging for satellites and missiles and aircraft to be able to tell what an object is. So the reliability of the software that we use in image processing for science is highly regarded.
I asked Jim to approximate the size of the so-called rods.
Well, it's not a high-quality videotape to start with, but there are some useful things in there. We have things we can compare to. Upon first examination, they look like a javelin to me, or a cruise missile. But when we studied the edges of it and compared it to the telephone pole and the tree that are right there in the same frame, it's about 100 feet. Some of the objects are most certainly moving at very high speed. 100, 150 miles an hour as they move overhead. Either this guy has figured out a way to do a pretty good hoax, and I'll catch him, or something really unusual and interesting is happening.
More than a little intrigued, I set out to get some footage of my own. But I found out that even though rods are thought to exist everywhere, they only make their appearance known infrequently.
they're random. They're so random that one day you'll catch one day you won't catch anything. It's like sky fishing. What we do is we just set up the camera, let it roll. If we catch one, we caught one, you know?
Anybody can do it. We have our kids do it. You should have a clean camera so you don't get false UFOs on the lens. Set it at a high shutter speed, the highest you can get it, at 1,000 or higher. We run ours at 10,000 shutter speed, which is great. You can see the bugs, you know, wings flapping and the whole bit. Try to get a focal point, you know, like a pole or a wire, things like that, so you can tell the distance between, or if it goes behind or in front.
Armed with our cameras, Jose, Karen, Jeff, and I went on a sky fishing expedition.
1/10,000.
Yeah. That's what we shoot at, 1/10,000.
That way, if it's a bug, you can see that it's a bug, because in each frame the wings will flap.
I've got buildings in that hole there, so I'll have to...
You'll have some perspectives to go by, especially if one of the objects flies on the other side of the power lines and things.
With our cameras set, all that was left to do was to wait for the rods to appear. We remained at the site for some time, but unfortunately, none of us was successful in capturing the elusive entities on tape. But I did manage to videotape several insects, which, as Jose told me, look entirely different than rods do when slowed down. That was a rod at regular speed, now in slow motion. This is a bug that goes across my camera at regular speed, now slowed down. You can clearly see the bug's wings. Now that is a known flying object. But this is still a mystery. A mystery that Jose Escamilla hopes science will one day help him solve.
What we want to do, we are trying to contact scientists and physicists, biologists, geologists, botanists, whatever you know. But we want to go out in the field and prepare a solid, bona fide scientific evaluation of what we're seeing out in the field, as well as documenting. So that way the scientific community can have a valid way of measuring what these things may really be. You know, we may find out.
Human curiosity. It compels us to sift through our past in search of the answers to our future. Tantalizing thought. I'm Patrick Mc.
Is the government covering up what they know about ETs and UFOs?
And the governments have got their ways of keeping their secrets, as many secrets they've been keeping for years and years and years, which the public probably will never ever find about. They've got their ways of suppressing people, but I think the biggest thing they ever did was create the aura of ridicule around the subject. It was a wonderfully orchestrated thing where people who lived in worked in responsible positions and this kind of thing, because of the ridicule syndrome that went with this thing, they were in imminent danger of being branded lunatics and losing their positions. Anybody who talked about the subject was branded an idiot. But of course that only went for so long, and after many, many more people started to have encounters and experiences, sooner or later this thing was going to surface, and that's precisely what it's doing at this moment in time.
I was fortunate a number of years ago to have a cosmic top-secret clearance when I was at Shape NATO. That clearance allowed me access to the Shape NATO study that they did from 1961 to 1964. And at the completion of that 3-year study, they concluded that we were not alone, we'd probably never been alone, that we were being visited, surveyed, studied, or some program of some kind was underway by several, and I want to repeat, several high-technology extraterrestrial civilizations. The impact of that alone on me was kind of earth-shaking. They determined as a result of their 3-year study that there did not appear to be a military threat involved, which was basically the primary purpose of the study itself in the first place.
Daniel Sheehan is the well-respected lawyer who broke the Karen Silkwood case and exposed the Iran-Contra scandal to Congress. He told us that President Carter asked Marcia Smith, head of the Science and Technology Division of the U.S. Congress Research Office, to find out about UFOs.
She began to prepare the data, was given access to both unclassified and some classified data to prepare her report. And it was on the basis of this analysis that she did and supervised out of the Congressional Research Office but she came to the official conclusion that there was from 1 to 2 other intelligent, highly developed civilizations within our galaxy, other than our planet. Now, that was a fairly extraordinary finding, but it exists on the record as an official finding of the Congressional Research Office, and it was communicated to the Congress and then to the President. At that point, nothing more was done to release the information officially to the American public.
But the public's not buying. Jose Escamilla shoots video of UFOs 10 hours a day, every day. He sees them at Midway, a small community close to Roswell, New Mexico.
We recently captured a V formation of about 32 huge, 50-foot in diameter dome objects that are flying in formation. And beyond a doubt, they're not geese. There's nothing that suggests a neck or wing flutter. We have 800 hours of daytime footage of UFOs, anywhere from 1 to 100 per day. And for that to happen so blatantly and in broad daylight, I think that's definitely something behind it. What I consider to be profound is when you see something in the sky that is of extraordinary proportions and is sitting there, and it's circular, and it's just sitting there. You think it's a balloon, but then you look at it and it starts gliding, you know, and then you see other things just flashing by at extreme speeds, and you're saying, are my eyes playing with me, or do I get sky blind, or what is that? And this thing just moves and glides effortlessly. And then when you go back and see it on tape and you go freeze frame and you see hundreds of other objects around that you didn't see with the naked eye, that's very profound to me.
There were more to encounter extraterrestrials. NASA appears to have issued the following guidelines. Don't tell anybody. Our first mission to Mars posed new theories questioning the existence of a possible civilization. If so, what will the future hold? In 1976, the Viking mission to Mars sent back striking photographs of the planet's surface. These photos show artificial structures on a Martian area called Sedona.
This is the object that is referred to as the face on Mars.
Stanley McDaniel, professor emeritus at Sonoma State University and Mars researcher, has extensively analyzed independent scientific evidence of the structures on Mars and NASA's arguments against further exploration of the area.
I found some material on it back in 1985 or so, and when the Mars Observer was launched, I became interested in it again. The other people are the researchers. I'm not a researcher who's studied the objects from the scientific point of view. What I've done is evaluated their research. My principal aim is to clarify the issues surrounding this subject. I found that their methods and techniques they've employed have been very sound and in keeping with what science is supposed to do. There's the eye socket shadow. There's another eye socket over here, but not as clear in this particular photo. How could you tell if an object on the surface of Mars is artificial? Well, you have to apply a number of different tests. You can't simply apply astronomical or physical tests or geological tests. You might have to apply criteria from archaeology or from architecture or even from symbolic methods of communication.
Researchers from the Mars investigation team believe these formations to be the ruins of intelligently designed structures.
Well, the face is what's called geologically a knob. Sometimes it's referred to as a mesa. It's about 1.5 miles long by 1 mile wide, so it's quite large. And it is an object which has the three-dimensional
and mystique. Below its surface lies vast, invisible energies that can have a profound and unique effect on all life forms on this Earth. From time warps and past life images to supernatural energies and visions of spirits, all of that and more lie within the boundaries of Sedona. Susan O'Leary went on a journey which took her far beyond imagination.
People claim that ancient power and magic lie within the mountains and canyons of Sedona. It was an atmosphere of mystery and strange tranquility that greeted me.
Susan's first encounter with Sedona's strange and unknown forces was the vortex energy centers. Gaia Lamb, a transformation guide, led the way.
Earth is a living, evolving being filled with places of tremendous power. These are vortices, sites linked to other dimensions.
Vortexes are energy centers where the energy is able to move in and out of the Earth.
Sedona is one of the major power points on our planet. There is Cathedral, a magnetic vortex where the energy moves down and through, presenting feminine energy. And Bell Rock, an electric vortex where the energy moves up and out, presenting masculine energy.
It is said that Bell Rock is a site where energies from outer space enter the aura and the body of the Earth. It connects our planet with other celestial bodies within and beyond our solar system.
Bell Rock is an entry point into the inner Earth. Many people have seen flying saucers or spaceships around Bell Rock. It is an entry point for the spaceships to go into the inner Earth.
In Sedona, the energies can be positive or negative. Your thoughts and emotions hold the key to how these energies can work for you or against you.
So if a person comes here and they're in a bad mood, their bad mood will get worse. It will really, in a sense, mirror what's going on within you.
Or magnify.
Magnify, exactly. Now, what we want to be able to do here is feel and sense the energy and also to see it.
As we were doing the breathing exercises, a bizarre sensation of heaviness came over me. This, Gaia explained, was the energy from the vortex at work.
The energies here are so strong. All right? I can definitely feel it. Definitely.
At the same time, as I looked across towards Bell Rock, I was suddenly able to see the aura emanating from it.
Because the energies from Bell Rock move up and out towards the cosmos, this is the perfect place to focus on what you want in life. We'll discover more of the people and the natural wonders in Sedona in just a moment.
At Bell Rock, there is an Alice Through the Looking Glass portal. Before entering, you ask the spirits for something you want. Then slowly, feeling the forces around you, you walk from one dimension into another. A burst of wind greeted me on the other side. A sign? I felt a chill go through my body as though someone or something was walking with me.
Reverend Pamela Hoffman explained to Susan how strong the energies of Sedona really can work.
If you do not belong here or you come here with the wrong attitudes, the energies in Sedona have a way of picking you up and spitting you out. It can work for you and it can work against you.
Several negative vortices exist throughout the world, dangerous in their effect on human life and consciousness. We are all familiar with the Bermuda Triangle. And then there is the Persian Gulf and Mount Calvary, the site of the crucifixion. Stonehenge in England is a positive vortex, which since ancient times and cultures has been linked to spirit and spiritual realms. It is also here in Sedona that the ancient Hopi Mesas came to live almost 1,000 years ago. Martin Wolf took Susan to one of those sacred places.
It is here that the Native American legends began, surrounded by the wondrous beauty.
And behind that beauty is the great mystery. And that's something for each person to determine for themselves what that great mystery is.
Another sacred site of the Native Americans are the medicine wheels. It is said that these circles of stones possess supernatural forces.
An air of sanctity prevailed. The ritual to enter this ancient site was about to start.
So when we come into a wheel, we walk clockwise. Our steps are like prayers that turn the wheel of life. A prayer for all living beings, for the healing of the sacred circle. The wheel also creates this gateway of energy, this vortex.
Whatever power the land here exudes, I would never know. But once again, I could feel the exotic forces of Sedona at work. At the Sedona Sanctuary, people experienced Reiki, a 2,500-year-old Japanese tradition. It is the natural laying of hands involving channeling of energy from people like Mason Romney, an energy consultant.
The hands become the electrodes. And the body, Einstein even talked about it as an incredible electrical system. And that electrical system is either blocked somewhere with an energy flow, and these energies could flow through you to someone.
After a while, I felt this incredible warmth spreading through my body. Mason told me that the energy they channel to your body stimulates the body's own innate wisdom, balancing and healing it. And who could choose more idyllic surroundings?
Many UFO sightings and alien contacts have been linked with the Sedona area. Robert Shapiro claims to be in contact with these beings from outer space.
A lot of people believe that there's underground ET bases out around Boynton Canyon and maybe around Sycamore Canyon. Who's to say how long they've been there? So it's hard to say whether this area, because of its energy, attracts ETs, or whether because ETs have been coming here for thousands of years.
What do you think the Palladians and the other ETs want?
They want to know what the heck we're doing down here and why. A, how we can take it. B, what we're doing with it. C, why we're doing it. And D, is there anything in it for them?
Robert also claims to channel these beings.
I have certain beings that I feel the most comfortable with, that I worked with for a long time.
It is one of those beings named Zosh that came through Robert as we were speaking. Zosh was able to tell me more about the future on Earth.
There will be some changes, there will be some storms, there will be some earthquakes, but it will not be what you have been led to believe is Armageddon. And true Armageddon happens within yourself. This experience you are having in life is designed to show you what works and, perhaps more importantly, what doesn't work. The key to being happy and fulfilled is to live your wisdom.
It is with this enlightenment and better understanding of Sedona's mystics that Susan told me she has to go back there.
Something magical happened up there. I'll need time to put it all in perspective, but whatever it was magic.
Also called the Twilight Zone, the Bermuda Triangle is a mysterious area somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean. Even in ideal weather conditions, planes and ships have vanished there without a trace. In rare instances, missing ships have been recovered without their crew or passengers. Many people claim to have witnessed other phenomena in that area, including balls of fire and objects that appear to be UFOs. Airplane crew members have reported sudden power failures and a strong magnetic force that pulls planes towards the sea. The skeptics claim that it is only people's imagination. It could be. Then again, who would dare go near the Bermuda Triangle looking for the truth? The natural energies of our planet, and even those within our body, seem limitless and extraordinary. I'm Patrick McNee. Join me next time for more mysteries, magic, and miracles.
Zoologists dismiss the stories of this beast as nothing more than a myth created by locals seeking to get their names in the paper. But scientists didn't always feel that way, because at one time such a creature did exist. Known as a Tasmanian tiger, for obvious reasons, it had the face of a wolf, the body of a hyena, and a pouch like a kangaroo. Sadly, the last of the species died in captivity in 1936. But if we are to believe eyewitnesses who claim to have recently photographed the bizarre beast, it is still alive today, safely hidden from man and avoiding extinction in the unexplored wilderness. If a living Tasmanian tiger is ever found, it won't be the first time a supposedly extinct animal is discovered alive. Case in point, shortly after the last captive Tasmanian tiger died, a strange-looking fish was caught off the coast of South Africa. It was subsequently sold to a woman who suspected that what she'd purchased was no ordinary animal.
She recognized this as something quite unusual, quite spectacular, and located the most eminent ichthyologist in South Africa, who immediately knew what it was because these things had been described as fossils.
It was a coelacanth, a species which was supposed to have died out over 70 million years earlier.
The dinosaurs became extinct 65 million years ago, so that even they didn't even make it that far.
How could a creature which had been around since the age of the dinosaur go completely unnoticed for so long? Was the ignorance of this prehistoric animal's existence an isolated case, or are there other species on the planet which science has overlooked? Dr. Stewart believes there are, and points to our vast oceans as the place where many could be found.
There will be doubtless more fossil fishes, more unknown fishes discovered in the future than there will be of any of the land-dwelling animals. How many there are out there? Well, you can only be exact once they're discovered, but one can only guess that there's several thousand.
Included in that large number is a previously unknown shark, which was discovered in recent years off Hawaii.
It's called the megamouth, and this is no small animal. And it's really quite fascinating that something that large could be living in our oceans, undetected by scientists for centuries.
But what else is lurking down there? Could there be something more sinister and threatening than just unknown fish and sharks? Throughout history, sailors have written about their vessels being attacked by sea serpents, giant squids, and other denizens of the deep. The similarity in the tales and their sheer number tend to make one believe they have some basis in truth. Now that the oceans are being systematically explored, will we find evidence that these mythological beasts actually exist? Some believe we already have been given a preview of one of the ocean's best-kept secrets. This is the decaying carcass of an enormous marine animal which was caught in the nets of a Japanese fishing vessel. This is the fossilized skeleton of a plesiosaur, a marine dinosaur which is generally believed to have died off with its better-known land-based cousins. Notice the similarities in the two animals. Both have small heads, long necks, and flippers. Is it possible that these are the remains of a recently deceased dinosaur? Unfortunately, we will never know because due to the unbearable stench of the rotting carcass, the fishermen threw it overboard before scientists could examine the amazing find. In Africa, tales of living dinosaurs have been rumored for centuries. Some believe they escaped extinction because, in prehistoric times, they lived in tropical climates. These regions remained unaffected by the Ice Age, thought to have caused the demise of other dinosaurs. Today's elephant-sized dinosaurs are said to live in a remote area of the Congo, in the caves and swamps of a nearly inaccessible lake. In a different jungle half a world away, zoologist David C. Oren is on the verge of finding another supposedly extinct animal. He reportedly has proof that the giant ground sloth, a beast which stood over 6 feet tall and weighed more than 400 pounds, is alive and well and living in the Amazon. Oren has identified the animal's tracks and possibly some of its blood. But because he has not been able to produce an actual specimen, many doubt that the sloth exists. Hundreds of miles north and several decades earlier, another scientist faced similar doubts. In 1920, along the Venezuela-Colombia border, a Swiss geologist and a survey team encountered two ape-like beasts, a male and a female, which were 5 feet tall and walked upright like humans. The male was shot and killed after he and his mate made motions to attack the explorers. This photograph is the only record of the find because, sadly, the rest of the evidence was lost when the party's boat capsized. Though the picture shows something quite unusual because there was no additional data, the discovery was ultimately dismissed. But skeptics abound when it comes to stories of animals which have yet to be discovered. Keep in mind, not so long ago, there were many who doubted the existence of the panda and the mountain gorilla. At one time, the species were thought to be mythological monsters, but today they are officially recognized members of the animal kingdom. Is it conceivable that the likes of such myths as Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster will also, one day, be recognized by scientists? It was several million years before man knew about the coelacanth, so I suppose only time will tell.
Is not linear, but vertical. We are living on top of our past. And when we dig deep enough, we not only find answers, we discover new questions.
The ground hides roots, the tunnels of burrowing animals, even our own dead. But underneath each layer, we can seek darker depths to reveal who we are and where we came from. It's an established fact that humans have been in the United States for 10 to 12,000 years. But what if there's evidence to the contrary, dating humans back 180,000 years? In the middle of the dusty, hot, and dry climate of the Mojave Desert, one of the greatest archaeological finds in North America was discovered by Ruth Diet Simpson, San Bernardino County archaeologist.
The concept has been that the first evidence of man in North America is between 12 and 14 or 15,000 years, and it's what they call Clovis. There is so much geological evidence and so many sites now that are being dated older that the Clovis concept is sort of outmoded.
Proof of early humans come in a startling array of tools, 60,000 to date, and the dig sites are still being worked.
These are hand axes. These two are ones that you could expect to find in Europe or in Asia or in Africa. Ones with a big butt up here to hold on to like this, and then a long, tapered, worked, modified, prepared tongue.
In 1980, the bombshell exploded. Scientific dating put the artifacts at around 200,000 years old. This makes the Calico site one of the 2 oldest dated sites in the Western Hemisphere, and the oldest in North America. With such compelling evidence, how or why would someone not believe this find is genuine? Does it pose a threat to evolution, or even our concept of the world?
Before we began digging, while I was still doing surface work in the area, there was a general feeling that the specimens were different.
She took the artifacts to one of the world's leading anthropologists, Dr. Louis Leakey, famous for the Olduvai Gorge discoveries in East Africa. He firmly believed in the American site and remained site director until his death. Others, however, have not been so accepting.
The dating is something that most people who will accept the artifacts will not accept the dates. They say that they are much too old. And there are those who say that the date's not old enough.
Dr. Bernice McAllister has brought her students to help excavate the 4th pit.
They tend to be people protecting their own sites, and they say that these tools were made by nature. Well, nature must have had hands like ours, Mother Nature, because whenever you find a absolutely smooth indentation in anything, it's usually not nature.
Archaeologist Fred Buttinger stumbled upon an important find, a hand axe. His discovery led to the building of a 4th pit.
As I was walking up this drainage that's right behind you, I noticed about an inch of an artifact protruding from the bank. And it was still in place. I had to excavate it out. It was a very, very nice oval, bifacially flaked tool. And the craftsmanship was distinctly different than anything that we had ever found in the pits.
If these tools were human-made, well, maybe that raises too many questions. The greatest of which, where did we come from?
The evidence here at Calico is a minimum of 200,000 years old. And with a date like that, it suggests that we're dealing with an earlier form of man.
It's hard to suggest, but I would be brave enough to say Homo erectus. simply on the basis of in the rest of the world, and I've seen this in Bangkok, also all over Europe, England, France, and North Africa.
Of course, we'd always love to find evidence of man himself. I doubt that we'd find much in the way of bone because of the soil chemistry. Unequivocal evidence of fire would be very good.
It may take finding a human hand to rattle the non-believers and to open up startling possibilities. A present-day Pandora's box.
Discovering who we are is not always an easy task. We come from many different backgrounds and mixtures of cultures. Whether you believe the Holy Scriptures or evolution, our roots are intertwined and far below, meeting at a source called Calico.
Ohio houses one of the greatest mysteries of North America, that of the mound builders, an ancient culture that left puzzling traces of their civilization through designs in the earth. The symbol of one huge earth serpent remains as much a mystery today as it did when it was discovered over a century ago. As the largest effigy in the world, the serpent stretches a quarter of a mile long, averaging 20 feet wide and 5 feet high. Holding an egg-shaped object in its mouth, it curves around like a writhing snake, its tail coiled. What it means, nobody knows.
Next on Larry King Weekend.
I think Roswell is the holy grail of this phenomenon.
After spending 25 years, I've found not a shred of evidence that we have alien visitors in our sky.
We think in 1947 they kept it covered up simply because they didn't know what they were dealing with.
On July 4th, 1947, something did crash on this lonely New Mexico ranch not far from the Roswell Army Airfield where A-bombs were stored. The rancher took some of the wreckage to the military. The military seized the wreckage and immediately secured the crash site.
Dead extraterrestrials were found, no question about it.
Word got out in the local paper but was retracted the next day, saying that was no saucer, that was a weather balloon.
Many of them clearly believed that it was, in fact, an extraterrestrial crash. Others simply didn't believe the weather balloon story.
In September 1994, the Air Force acknowledged there was a cover-up at Roswell, but denied the secret at stake was a UFO.
They say it might be a super top secret, American secret that even we don't know about.
The town now boasts 2 UFO museums, which tells the story a lot of people want to believe. Next week, the town of Roswell celebrates the 50th anniversary of the crash at Roswell. UFO enthusiasts and just curiosity seekers from all over the world are expected to attend. Good evening, and welcome to this edition of Larry King Weekend. Because of the unusual interest in the possibility of extraterrestrial life, I have welcomed many guests on this show to talk about the Roswell story as well as other alleged UFO encounters. Tonight, we'll take a look back at the best of our Roswell programs, and later in the show, take a personal story look of abduction and tall tales and extraordinary evidence. Maybe, maybe not. You decide for yourself.
What we know is, based on the eyewitness testimony, Mac Brazel, a rancher in the area, discovered a debris field, 3/4 of a mile long, 200 to 300 feet wide.
Near an Air Force base.
Near, actually the town of Corona, New Mexico, about 75 miles northwest of the town of Roswell, New Mexico, Roswell Army Airfield at that time. Not being able to recognize the debris, he took it to the Chaves County Sheriff, George Wilcox. Wilcox also couldn't recognize the debris, and he called the Air Force, or actually at the time the Army Air Force, at the Roswell Army Airfield. They responded with Jesse Marcel, the air intelligence officer, later a counterintelligence agent, and finally the base commander, Colonel Blanchard.
And they came and took the debris?
They came and examined the debris that Brazel had brought to the sheriff's office. Blanchard ordered Marcel and Brazel back out to the ranch to collect more of the debris. That debris that was brought to the Chaves County Sheriff was put on an airplane, flown to the Fort Worth Army Airfield, and then taken on to Washington, D.C. on orders of General Clements McMullen, acting for the Army Chief of Staff.
This story is so many years ago. Why now? Why this book?
We just completed our investigation.
Who's we?
Donald Schmidt and I, working with the Center for UFO Studies. I should have said that before.
And you've been interested in this topic for a long time.
I've been interested in this topic.
Has a lot written about this before?
Not about this specific incident. There have been things that have been written about crashes of UFOs before. And
Whitley Strieber wrote a novel based on this kind of concept.
Based on this.
But I've always heard about Roswell, New Mexico and this
Well, there
incident.
was a book published in 1980 that he knows about, so he's covering up that, written by William Moore and Berlitz, and it was called the Roswell Incident. And it covered the same thing. I don't know if
I'm not covering up the fact there was another book written. What I'm saying is our investigation started from the beginning, found 300 witnesses involved in this, eyewitnesses to this event.
Walter, you were in Roswell at the time?
I sure was. I was the public relations officer for Roswell Army Airfield at that time.
Did you see the debris?
No, I did not. My only connection really was the fact that I received a phone call from Colonel Blanchard, who informed me that we had in our possession a flying saucer and that Major Marcel had gone out to the site, picked up materials, and brought them back to the base. And he was going to fly that onto Fort Worth to give it to General Ramey.
And you issued a release saying what?
Basically what I just told you, the fact that we had in our possession a flying saucer, and it was being flown to Fort Worth by Major Marcel.
Gotcha. Have you read Kevin's book?
Yes, sir.
Do you believe it?
Yes, I certainly do.
Why don't you believe it, Philip?
Well, first off...
You believe in UFOs, by the way, or don't believe it?
Well, I believe that people report seeing things they cannot identify. But after spending 25 years, I've found not a shred of evidence that we have alien visitors in our skies.
But what's wrong with Kevin's story?
All right, well, let me tell you. He ignores the hard evidence, and he covers up. For example, in his book, he mentions this letter by Lieutenant General Twining. Now, 2 months after this alleged crash saucer was recovered, after hundreds of people, according to him, in New Mexico, little nobodies that had no business to know, they knew about it. But General Shulgin of the Air Staff in Washington, apparently somebody forgot to tell him, a top intelligence officer. So he wrote to General Twining, who was then head of the Air Materiel Command, which included the Air Technical Intelligence Center. And on September 23rd, General Twining replied, giving an assessment of...
And what was his assessment?
And his assessment, Kevin in his book quotes only that part that says, well, it looks like they're real. What he omits is Twining's statement that consideration must be given to the fact the lack of physical evidence in the shape of crash recovered exhibits which would undeniably prove the existence of these objects. So Kevin quotes the letter, parts of it, but leaves that out.
No physical evidence, Kevin.
There is physical evidence. It's at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. There's no question about that. What Phil forgets to tell you about that letter, what was the reason that he wrote to that letter? It's only classified secret, not top secret. The material at Roswell was classified as top secret. Therefore, he couldn't mention in that letter without creating the...
Are you saying that extraterrestrials were found in Roswell?
Yes.
Dead?
Dead extraterrestrials were found, no question about it.
And brought to Wright-Patterson?
Brought to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Flown out of Roswell on B-29 tail number 7301.
Why was this not a story immediately revealed to people?
The story came out in the press.
Walter, do you believe that?
I sure do.
You do, based on your being it and what other officers told you who saw the site?
That's correct. Major Marcel, who was the intelligence officer who went to the site, who took the materials to General Ramey, told me personally in about 1980 that the materials that they had picked up were not of this planet.
That's
And he
33
was
years after the event, he told you that, when
That
he
is
was then
correct.
about 80 years old. Is that right?
That's right. But he also has a son who will vouch for the same thing, who was 11 years old at the time, who is now a medical doctor, a flight surgeon in the Air National Guard, and a very competent individual, as he was a very intelligent and competent young gentleman.
Roswell, 50 years of questions. More when we return.
The role of the anchor really is to...
Eternity. Everyone's always worried about Wright Patterson.
Absolutely.
Why doesn't somebody go to Wright Patterson? Secretary Cheney could go to Wright Patterson, open up, let's see this. Why didn't you go to Wright Patterson?
I've been to Wright Patterson, and actually I don't have the sufficient clearances to see it.
Can Cheney get in?
Yeah. Cheney can get in, but he may not have the clearances sufficient to see this specific material.
Secretary of Defense.
He probably can see it. I'm just saying what they have done is create a level of security that
For what purpose?
To keep it covered up.
Why?
We think in 1947 they kept it covered up simply because they didn't know what they were dealing with. That we'd just come out of the most disastrous war ever fought. They had to cover it up until they could figure out what it was. In 1961, the Brookings Institution did a report for the NASA, and they said as part of that report that if there was contact with extraterrestrials, that every time a superior civilization meets with an inferior civilization, the inferior civilization ceases to exist. This is a Brookings report done in 1961.
So you think we'd be frightened to learn this?
I didn't say that. I said it would be...
That's your guess as to
no,
why
what I said was the inferior civilization ceases to exist as it does.
By the way, if they're superior, why land in New Mexico and say not Washington? Nothing against New Mexico.
Well, they didn't land. They crashed in New Mexico. But at the time, New Mexico was one of the few places that had an atomic bomb dropped on it. It was a place of high-level atomic research. It was also a place where they were doing rocket research.
Philip, are you a debunker of all UFO stories?
Well,
is that your purpose?
I looked for explanations. Now, he talked about the fact that it was top secret. All right, here is a copy, and he's familiar. It appeared on the in a UFO, the UFO Journal here. This is a top secret assessment made December 10th, 1948 by the top Air Force Navy intelligence.
And what's the conclusion?
It was released only several years ago. And what they say is, we don't know. We've been getting UFO reports. Conceivably, they say it might be a super top secret American secret that even we don't know about. But they say more likely it is secret Russian reconnaissance vehicles built and designed by the very fine German scientists that the Russians had captured.
You don't question that something strange happened in New Mexico?
I only question, well, what was recovered was a radar target, balloon borne.
That is the cover story that was put out. We know it was a cover story based on the testimony of the people who put out the cover story.
Joining us by phone is Dr. Jesse Marcel, Jr., the son of Jesse Marcel, the Army intelligence officer who claimed he recovered the debris of the Roswell crash. Doctor, you were 11 years old at that time, right?
Yes, I was, Larry.
What did your father tell you?
Well, he woke both my mother and myself up very late one night, and he wanted us to look at what he had hauled in from the desert. And I helped him unload this material from the car. There was several boxes of this metallic debris. We brought it inside the house and tried to lay it on the kitchen floor to make some sense out of any arrangement or structural members there were.
What did it feel like?
It was a metallic, foil-like debris, kind of dull, as I recall, but that's been 44 years ago.
It wasn't a balloon?
No, sir, it was not a balloon. I'd already seen weather balloons before, plus the radar target.
This is the radar target reflector that he's describing here.
What did your father think it was?
He, at that time, did not know what it was. He did not have any idea. He knew it was not a weather balloon or a radar target.
He knew that?
That was part of his training. He had a lot of training in radar, and this was not what that was, I assure you.
Well, 11 years is an age of curiosity. Didn't you keep questioning him?
Well, we did talk about it at length later, and I must say that extraordinary events like this trigger extraordinary memory, where you do recall a lot of details that you would not normally have.
And you're saying you believe Kevin?
I believe Kevin, I sure do, because the nature of the material that we saw, I guess the most startling aspect of this was the I-beam fragments that had hieroglyphic-type writing across it. I recall the color. I discussed this years later with my dad. He agreed the color was violet purple. This was imprinted or embossed on the inner surface of these I-beam type fragments.
Philip, you would think you're an aviation specialist. You've written for Aviation Magazine, right, for years.
Right, 40 years.
But you'd want to dig this up.
Well, let me...
You're not saying Jesse's lying
let me
or
say
Walter's
that
lying.
there are three principles. First-hand witnesses, two of them are dead. The third one is living, and this is a man named Sheridan Cavett. Will you give us his address and telephone number, or at least his address? Maybe your staff can call Cavett, and let's get him on.
Well, he was at the base?
He was not only at the base, he went out with Marcel to the site.
And what does he say?
He doesn't even quote him in the book.
What does he say?
Actually, we do quote Cavett in the book. We quote him a number of times in the book.
On page 273.
And he denies it?
He denies that he was there at the base first. We finally proved to him that he was at the base. He concedes that he was at the base. He doesn't remember a thing about this. He said it never happened. It was not in the newspapers. In other words, he's part of the cover-up.
Wait a minute. You're not saying nothing happened that day, are you, Philip?
No, what I'm saying...
Jesse's father didn't bring home something?
Why not ask Philip if he's interviewed any of the witnesses?
I have interviewed those who are familiar with the hard evidence.
Have you interviewed any of the witnesses to the Roswell crash? Any of them?
No.
No.
All right.
Walter, what convinced you was the commanding officer's attitude? Was that what convinced you, Walt?
I think the thing that convinced me that it was a flying object was just Marcel more than anybody else, and that was quite a number of years afterward.
Coming up next, a U.S. congressman who's trying to uncover the mystery of Roswell. What got you interested in this subject per se?
I started receiving letters a little over 2 years ago from constituents stating that they believed the government was covering up what happened at Roswell. Many of them clearly believed that it was, in fact, an extraterrestrial crash. Others simply didn't believe the weather balloon story. That didn't necessarily mean they did believe.
That it was kind of a cover-up, and a crash with dead bodies of extraterrestrials.
Some people believe that. But what all the letters had in common, whether they stated their own beliefs or not, is that they didn't believe the weather balloon story given by the Air Force. And as I looked at it, that was not a believable story, and the Air Force recently disavowed that part of it.
What do you now, and does this government now conclude?
In September of 1994, the Air Force released a new report where they said it was not a weather balloon. They took that off the table. And they stated that instead it was a balloon, but it was a different kind of balloon. It was apparently larger for high altitude flight with kind of detection devices to see if the Soviet Union was exploding nuclear weapons in the atmosphere.
You accept that?
Well, I kind of stay away from my conclusion. I think my official role has been to try to get government records. I would say this much, though. And in fact, I have to, one quick moment for New Mexicans. The Albuquerque Journal reported that I did accept it. That's a mistake. I never did.
You do not accept it,
well,
nor reject it?
I'm open-minded on it. I would say this much, though, very briefly. The weather balloon story never made sense because there was clearly and undisputed, in my mind, extra military attention to this matter, from extra security around the crash scene to special handling of whatever the debris was. That could fit a classified project. It doesn't fit a weather balloon.
Do you believe that Miss Matthews and that Mr. Strieber were abducted? Do you believe that something crashed at Roswell, New Mexico, and that there were bodies there from somewhere else?
Can I do A, part of the above, B, part of the above?
You may. Two from column A, one from column B.
I think Miss Matthews, Mr. Strieber absolutely believe that they've been abducted by aliens. And I'm not going to say that they're crazy. And I'm certainly not going to say that this is part of a cult. I think Phil Klass does them all a disservice, and including the people who are doing research into this field. As for Roswell, all I can say is when I was in Congressman Schiff's area in Albuquerque, when I was pushing the book, over and over again, I had people come up to me who had said, you know, my uncle, when he was a kid, was invited out to look at the debris field, and he said he saw this stuff, and 20 years later when I asked him, was it true, he said, yep. Or the sheriff who was kidded about, well, Harry, did you see the little green men? And Harry would then say, they weren't green.
I mean, the elusiveness of this phenomenon is so extraordinary. There's always this bubble that you just think you have hold of it, and all of a sudden it pops.
Were you a doubter who now doesn't doubt anymore regarding Roswell?
I think Roswell is the holy grail of this phenomenon. I would really like to know what happened in Roswell. I recently saw stills from the alleged autopsy film that was made of the alien beings there, and they didn't look like aliens to me. So, I mean, once again, just as you think you have something you can go on, it effervesces.
I just wanted to add that once it became public that I had gotten involved in this record search, quite a number of New Mexicans, maybe this would be true elsewhere, but I live in New Mexico, quite a number of New Mexicans came up to me and said, you know, for years, my family has wondered what really happened down there. So I heard a lot of what your other guests
And would you say, Congressman, that most Americans kind of believe something's out there?
Most Americans don't believe they were told the whole story by their government. Again, that's split between those who say, therefore, it's extraterrestrial from outer space, and those who say there's still some other explanation. But I have to tell you plainly, Larry, that when I decided to look into this, I took a deep breath because, you know, some of the repercussions were obvious. But it's been, the reaction has been universally positive.
More of the mystery of Roswell when we return.
They have not explained why they had to cover it up to the year 1994. If their explanation was this was a then classified project, then I can understand that in 1947. But the Soviet Union has come and gone during those decades, much less our knowing they had nuclear capability. So what took so long is something they haven't explained.
If I were the Secretary of the Air Force and it was my responsibility to defend the skies, and I couldn't do any better job than they seem to be doing with these objects dashing in and out and plucking people from their beds, allegedly, then I would deny it. I deny that it was going on at all.
When you talk to the Department of Defense, what do they tell you?
Well, the first thing they did was just send me to another agency, the National Archives. And they did that twice in a row. And I then went to the National Archives, and the National Archives said, we don't have any information about Roswell. And by the way, they had an interesting note at the end. They said, for some reason, we've received a lot of requests here at the National Archives. And I'm thinking I'm not terribly surprised if the Defense Department is sending anyone there. That's the point where I felt pretty upset because I thought I was pretty clearly getting a runaround.
Something's not ringing clear.
Defense Department must have known when they sent me to the National Archives there was nothing there.
Next, personal stories of UFO abductions.
When I'm inside of a ship, I have medical procedures performed on me, and I have the surgical scars to prove it afterwards.
How long have you been a patient, Mary, of Dr. Max?
I first contacted John in November of 1992.
Why did you think you needed psychiatric help?
I didn't think I needed psychiatric help. I needed someone who really believed that this was happening. I needed someone who was doing active research on the subject matter. I've been having experiences for most of my life, and I had no doubt what was going on. It was simply hard to find someone to talk to about it that had an open mind.
Before we hear your story, what turned you?
I first...
Did you have a closed mind?
When I first heard about Bud Hopkins, this painter in New York who took seriously the stories of people who reported being brought up into spacecraft by alien beings, I thought there must be something wrong with this man and that he must be describing some new form of mental illness. But then when I went to visit him and heard the stories that he was telling me, began to see the people myself, and now have worked with approximately 90 people who have had these experiences. What is extraordinary about it is the consistency of the stories among people who are of sound mind, who come forth very reluctantly, as Mary has, who doubt their own stories, who describe what they've gone through with great emotion.
Are you saying then, Doctor, that it happened to them, or that they firmly believe it happened to them?
Again, the whole thing has made me re-examine all of these notions of happen, didn't happen. For them, it is completely real, and it is not the product of mental illness. Now, whether it happened altogether in this reality, I don't know. but it shows up in their world. They're seen to be missing by witnesses at the time, so something is occurring that is entering our world.
It's been happening to you a long time. Can you give us a typical happening? What happened this to you?
Well, it's never a typical happening.
When was the last one?
The last one was April 11th.
This year?
That's correct.
What happened?
Well, I had a visit from several beings, and there were also several humans present at the time.
Now, these beings came through the door?
Very often, no, they don't come through the door. Very often, with my experiences, they literally materialize in front of my eyes.
You don't see spaceships?
I have been inside of ships. I never get to see them from the outside. I'm always on the inside.
How do you get in?
Usually, I am transported through a window.
And why do they keep coming to you? Do they converse with you? Do they communicate to you?
I think there's more communication now than there used to be.
What are they telling you?
Well, they're telling me a lot of things. One of the things they've told me consistently is that they care, that they're not here treating us as guinea pigs or human experiments, that there is some level of concern on their part for our well-being.
This is said in English by people who look like what?
This is said telepathically. Most of the communication that transpires between myself and them is telepathic.
Isn't that the first trigger a psychiatrist says, mental illness? I'm hearing things telepathically. The radio is talking to me. People are telling me what to do. I'm hearing voices.
You might think so, but in these cases, these people have been examined by myself. They've been tested psychologically. They are of above average intelligence. They are of sound mind. They've been shown as of superior mental functioning by the testers. So there is not indication of any kind of psychiatric condition that can account for this that I've been able to find.
Do you, Mary, telepathically respond back to them?
Yes, I do.
Have you ever asked them the basic, simple question? Why don't you land at the White House?
No, I haven't asked them that. My concern is, why do you come here to see me?
And what do they tell you?
The answer is, because we care.
Okay, but I mean, why did you ever ask them why they didn't go see Madame Albright? Or why they didn't go see...
I wish they'd go see everyone. I wish they'd go see everyone.
Why don't they come here now, do you think?
I wish they'd go see everyone, because then more people would have the opportunity to experience what people like myself are.
Why do you think they don't materialize here?
I think that perhaps the society is not ready for this.
But you are, and they're not?
I'm reluctantly ready for it. This has been happening most of my life, and there's no way to get away from it. So for people like me, we're sort of forced to deal with it.
And Mary's story is like a lot of other stories.
It's a very characteristic story.
That the beings appear.
Yeah. In fact, when one abductee hears the story of another abductee, they react with shock because they don't want to believe it's true. They would rather believe it's a dream or a form of mental illness than that this is something real, because it's so shattering to their notion of reality. And that's happened over and over again among the people I've been working with.
Do you travel on the ship?
Yes, I have.
Too?
We're in the ship. We don't go anywhere else that I know of. Usually, when I'm inside of a ship, I have medical procedures performed on me, and I have the surgical scars to prove it afterwards.
Can you show us any?
They're not in a place where I'm willing to show you.
Do they attempt sexuality with you?
No, all of the procedures that I have had done that involve the reproductive organs have been medical procedures. I have been lying on a table, another human has been lying on a table, and eggs have been extracted from my ovaries. That's happened repeatedly throughout my life.
A little scared of this?
Yes, I'm petrified.
What age did it start?
Age 7.
They didn't have ovaries then?
No, at age 7, I think it was a little less traumatic to deal with.
You ever take pictures?
Of them?
Yeah.
No. I have audio tapes, though.
I
make audio tapes in my room. Yes, I do.
Okay, I think we're going to show something here. And then you tell us what we're going to see if they put it up to the control room. What is this, a drawing?
Basically, I've been doing some surrealistic drawings just to help myself come to grips with what's happening to me. And I do different paintings of different beings. I use a lot of very bright colors. I try to make them a little bit more palatable to me, and I paste them all over my bedroom wall. It's sort of, right, it's sort of my way of acknowledging what's happening to me. I spent the bulk of my life running away from it, the bulk of my life hiding it from everyone, Larry. And I think now's the time to sort of come out about this. And the artwork is my way of expressing something that's been really buried deeply for a long time.
What's that on the side?
The symbols, I have no idea what they are.
They drew them?
No.
Or you drew them, but you don't know why you drew them?
I don't know why I've drawn them, no. But I think they're very important.
What does it all mean, Dr. Mack?
Well, one of the reasons, I don't know what it means. It's some kind of invitation to us to accept another reality. That's one of the things that's going on. What this breeding, what this taking of eggs, taking of sperm from the men, what this creation of these hybrid beings is about, what the aliens will tell us is that it has something to do with evolution, that we're moving to another level of creation.
You are a psychiatrist. You're therefore an MD. Have you examined Mary?
Have I done a physical examination on Mary? No, I haven't, but
Why
I've
not?
seen...
God, when you want to
But
do
I
it?
have, no, I have looked in the case of many abductees who have marks on their body, or scoop marks, or in the case of one man who had a number of these lesions in a symmetrical arrangement, and the critics will often say, well, they're self-inflicted. This man happens to be a quadriplegic, and he can't do it.
Have you
to
seen
himself.
implants?
I've been analyzing the implant that came from the nose of one of the people I've been working with. I thought at one time the implants would give us that smoking gun of proof that our Western mind likes to have so much. But what I find is that the implant, and others have found this too, are not made of some strange, bizarre metals that's going to give us that proof that this is extraterrestrial.
Can your OBGYN help?
Has my doctor helped?
Can he say publicly, well, there are some things that Mary has, nobody has?
I think that he's always been very confused about some of the things that have gone on with me, and for a long time I didn't tell him what was happening. I've had about 6 ovarian cysts, all of which have come after encounters with these beings.
More stories of abduction when we return.
Small being, very thin, very large black eyes.
Terry Matthews is not her real name, and she's using this pseudonym and wearing glasses to protect her identity. Why?
Well, there are a lot of horror stories about people who have come forward and talked about this subject before. And
Horror stories like?
having shows use people's real name has cost people jobs and harassment of their children.
I mean, people get fired because they say this happened to them?
Ridiculed, harassed.
You have been on these kind of trips against your will for how long?
I believe that I have been since I was a child.
When you say I believe that I have been, have you or haven't you? I mean, I know I flew a plane last week. I don't believe I flew a plane. I know I flew a plane.
I know that I have. For a long time, I suspected it. There were too many things that happened when I was a child that were not normal, and I thought they were.
Things that now happen to your children as well?
Yes.
You have how many children?
I have 3.
Are you married?
No, not now.
Was your husband a believer?
We didn't discuss this.
Was it a cause of stress in the marriage?
Probably.
Okay. Tell me your earliest memory of being abducted. What happened?
My earliest memory was, well, there are suspicions about age 5, but my earliest
actual memory,
actual memory is when I was 9. And
what happened?
I was in my bedroom playing with my paper dolls, and I believed at the time that my father was walking into the room. And what it was not my father. It was a gray.
A what?
A gray.
What do we mean by that?
Small being, very thin, very large black eyes.
Called a gray by whom? By you?
Yes.
For want of a better,
Right.
They look gray.
Yes.
One person?
I saw one. But at the same time, I saw an image of my father.
Behind him?
I saw them both in the room, and then they came together.
What did you do?
I didn't react at all, which was unusual.
Didn't scream, didn't yell?
No, there's a lot of control that they exert over us. You don't act appropriately.
Because they're exerting control.
Right.
Do they take you places? If you're an abductee, they have to, right?
Yes.
Where to?
The coming and going is not always clear. There have been abductions that I have felt as if I was going through a tunnel, almost shaped like a funnel. It's very fast. There's a lot of light. Sometimes it's a big black void.
Any method of travel? Ship, anything?
I do end up in a place where there are hallways and waiting rooms and examination rooms.
Are you spoken to?
I understand and know what they're saying to me. I don't hear words.
You mean they're transmitting this through?
Yes, telepathy or whatever.
What kind of experiments?
Gynecological, reproductive. There are some that I don't understand completely what they were doing to me. At one point, one of them, when I was 9, I believe, or 10, reached in and held my heart.
When was the last time you were abducted?
I suspect, I haven't had an opportunity to examine it, but about 2 to 3 weeks ago.
Well, explain to me between suspect and examine.
There is physical evidence sometimes
You mean, so you know
that
you're not
can't
dreaming?
be explained, right, that can't be explained.
You mean they leave something?
Sometimes it's being conscious and seeing something unusual in your bedroom, like a circle of energy, or sometimes it's having your pajamas on inside out.
Coming up next, a story of abduction that was made into a feature movie. What happened, Travis? Your own words, briefly.
Okay, well, it was...
just another day.
Yeah, just another work day out in the woods, cutting trees.
This is where?
In the Sitka National Forest in Arizona. There were 7 of us. It was starting to get dark. We loaded up our chainsaws and...
You're a logger, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And we were headed home. As we were leaving there, we saw a light coming through the trees. And when we finally got down the road to where we could see the source of this light, we saw a UFO hovering near the road.
All 7 of you?
All 7 of us. It was only 90 feet away. It was very clear and unmistakable. The minute it came into view, somebody yelled, it's a spaceship, or something like that. We stopped the truck, and I got out and went toward it.
Not just you, not the other 6?
Not the other 6. They were yelling at me to get back in the truck and get away from there.
Good thinking.
Yeah, it would have been. Anyway, as I got closer to it, it started to move and the sound started to get louder. And that scared me. I jumped down behind some cover there, and the men in the truck were screaming at me to get away from there. So I raised up to go, and I was hit. It felt like a physical blow, and I blacked out. The men in the truck said they saw a powerful bolt of energy come out of the bottom of the craft and hit me. They said it just looked like a grenade went off in front of me. They said it threw me through the air about 10 feet.
You were watching this, right, Mike?
Yes. And they said I hit the ground limp, and they thought it killed me. So...
They left?
They left.
Out of fright, too?
Yes.
Now, what happened to you? What do you remember?
I was missing for 5 days and 6 hours before I woke up on the roadway outside of Heber. That's a little town near where this happened.
Do you have lots of memories of those 5 days?
Not lots. Actually, less than 20 minutes. It's a very difficult thing to recall.
Did you go somewhere with them?
Yes, apparently.
To?
I don't know.
To take off? I mean, do you remember it taking off?
When I was returned, I saw it take off.
When you were returned? Oh, you saw it leave?
Yes.
But you don't remember it leaving with you in it?
No, I regained consciousness on board the craft.
Oh, you were on board the craft? Yes. You remember that?
Yes.
What do they want with you?
I don't know. It's, what I remember seems to be so much like a fragment of something that, it's just very difficult to make any sense out of it.
What did they look like?
They looked like, well, they were 4 or 5 feet tall, humanoid looking, hairless creatures with very large eyes.
Male, female?
Can't really tell.
Did they talk?
No, they never spoke.
They never said a word?
Never said a word.
What did they do to you?
Well, I don't know. I just regained consciousness, and as soon as I saw him, I just flipped out. I became hysterical and pushed him away from me and lashed out at him. So whatever was going on was while I was unconscious.
What shape were you in 5 days later?
I was in pretty bad shape.
No food?
Well, I had some medical tests that suggested that there wasn't starvation. Because they say that, you know, if you haven't had any food for 5 days, the ketones or acetones will show up in a urine sample. But there weren't any in the sample, so they're thinking that probably there must have been some sort of nutrition. But that's disputable, too.
What did you think, Mike, when you saw all this?
From where?
Watching the bolt come down and hit him.
Well, all of the guys described this thing that hit him as being a very powerful bolt of energy, a blue flame. It's been described as many things by the guys there. When it hit him, it was powerful enough to knock him back. I mean, it was like he said, like an explosion going off in front of him.
Why'd you leave?
It was blind panic. I didn't have time to think. I mean, we were already scared.
Did anyone think of going to get Travis?
Yeah. After I had left, I was driving the truck, and after I had gone down the road about a quarter of a mile, then I was thinking. And I had time to think, to stop what I'd done.
Did you go back?
Yeah, after a hysterical sort of a discussion among us.
What happened when you went back?
He wasn't there.
Nor was the UFO?
And no, it wasn't.
From CNN International, American Edition, a daily roundup of the latest news, business, and weather forecasts. Reported live and updated 3 times each day. Watch for the next American Edition.
Do visitors from the unknown really exist? Or are they just a collective daydream? The question still remains, are we alone in the universe?
Just like water with no wrinkles.
And it looked like there's a hieroglyphic type writing written along the inside surface of the I-beam.
They had no earlobes. They had 2 ear canals, 2 very small orifices for the nose, a concave face.
Oh, yes, it was a cover-up from the beginning.
Roswell, New Mexico, 1947. A military town and Air Force base. Home to America's 509 bomb group. A tight-knit community of soldiers and civilians in the heartland of rural America. In the summer of 1947, the whole of America was gripped by a wave of sightings of flying saucers. In Roswell, there were many witnesses to a strange light in the sky.
But it was just going in a northerly motion at a pretty rapid speed, but nothing like a falling star or a meteorite. So bright like that, you couldn't look direct at it very long at a time. Then you had to look to the side of it, just like looking into a bright sun.
William Woody is 61, a pig farmer who works for the local bus company in Roswell. He remembers to this day the light he saw in the sky on the night of the 4th of July, 1947.
I was 13 years alive, and that was the first time I'd ever seen anything like that. We got in the old truck one morning and headed north out 285 just to see if we could locate it. Every exit or path off of the highway was blocked off with the military sentries, and said that that was under investigation and nobody was allowed to go either east or west off of the highway.
On the Foster Ranch, 75 miles northwest of Roswell, Mac Brazel, a farmhand, was on his daily rounds when he came across some strange material scattered in the fields. His sheep refused to go near it. Unable to identify what it was, Brazel traveled 20 miles to show his nearest neighbor what he had found. Loretta Proctor is 83 and still lives on the same ranch near Corona, north of Roswell. She remembers Brazel arriving on horseback with a collection of strange material.
He showed us this piece that looked like plastic or wood of some kind, and he said that there was some metallic-looking stuff that when you crushed it, it just straightened right back out. It wouldn't, wouldn't stay crushed. And there was some beams or something that he said had kind of pinkish purple printing on it. Well, we told him it's probably a UFO and he should report it.
Brazel took her advice and traveled into Roswell town with the strange debris. He reported his find to the sheriff of Chavez County. Sheriff George Wilcox immediately notified the local air base. Roswell Army Airfield was home to the 509, America's elite bomb group, which had dropped the atomic bomb on Japan. As the only atomic bomb squadron in the world, it was surrounded by the highest levels of security and secrecy. The 509's air intelligence officer was Major Jesse Marcel. He was assigned to investigate the material that Brazel had brought in. Marcel drove out to the Foster Ranch to collect some of the debris. That night, he brought it back to his house to show his wife and son.
He came back real late one night, about 2 o'clock in the morning, as I recall, very excited because he woke myself, my mother up, saying they found parts of a UFO or a flying saucer at that time. And he wanted me to see it because it was such of an unusual type of finding.
Dr. Jesse Marcel Jr. is himself a pilot, colonel and state surgeon in Montana's Air Force Reserve. In 1947, he was 12 years old, but he vividly remembers the extraordinary nature of the material he saw that night in Roswell.
As I recall, the most unusual part of the debris that I saw was the I-beam fragments, or what I recall as being I-beam, because they were very light, very strong, and they had some writing along the inside surface of this. And that was the thing that really set this apart from anything I'd ever seen before.
Dan Dwyer and his colleagues in the Roswell Fire Brigade were also involved. The fireman was shown some remarkable material with curious properties. Dwyer's daughter, Frankie, was in the station at the time and remembers picking it up.
When I would wad it up, it was like I had nothing in my hand. I couldn't feel it touching my skin. It was real weird. You drop it on the table and it was just like water, the way it would spread out.
Meanwhile, Major Marcel brought the material he'd recovered back to Roswell Army Airfield, where the commanding officer, Colonel Butch Blanchard, surprisingly ordered his public information officer, First Lieutenant Walter Hott, to issue an astonishing statement to the press.
I was instructed by Colonel Blanchard to put out a press release which in effect stated that we had in our possession a flying saucer. In essence, it said that we have in our possession a flying disc. It was picked up on a ranch, and I can't remember if I said northwest of Roswell, brought into town by Mac Brazel, the ranch foreman, and the material was flown to higher headquarters, 8th Air Force, General Ramey.
It was an announcement that stunned the world. The London Daily Telegraph reported that although no details were given of the craft, the Air Force claimed that it was a flimsy construction, like a box kite. A small town in America had become the center of the world's attention.
There was a tremendous amount of excitement because here I am, a little country editor in a small city in New Mexico, talking to Paris and Rome and London and Tokyo, and I can't remember all of them. Spent the whole afternoon on the phone, and I know that my counterparts at the Roswell paper and probably at the radio stations did the same. But there was a lot of excitement.
America was transfixed. Radio networks issued hourly bulletins. This is an actual bulletin of the time.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile, found sometime last week, has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico, and sent to Wright Field, Ohio, for further inspection. Russia has demanded UN action to get all foreign...
Major Marcel had flown samples of the material to Fort Worth, Texas, headquarters of the 8th Air Force. Here, the story would take a remarkable new turn. General Roger Ramey, the commanding officer there, called a press conference in his office. In front of photographers, he invited Major Marcel to display the material he had brought from Roswell. The base duty weather officer was also ordered to attend to explain to the press precisely what Major Marcel was holding in his hands.
The general called and said, "Get your ass over here to my office. We got something here we want you to look at." And aye, sir. And he says, "If you've got a car, fine. If you haven't, get one. Get the first means of transportation and get over to my office." And when I saw that, I said, "Is that your flying saucer?" And they said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, hell no. That's a Raven target and balloon. And if it isn't," I said, "I'd eat it without salt or pepper. I know what that is." "Are you sure?" "Yes, I'm sure. I know what that is."
This is what I would like to show you. In here, this is the photograph of the debris that was seen in General Ramey's office at Carswell Air Force Base in Fort Worth, Texas. This is my father holding up what is very obviously parts of radar target with balloon debris. In here, you see balsa wood fragments. You have actually parts of the balloon envelope in of itself, and you have what looks like paperback metal foil. And to emphasize this, this is not what was seen on the floor of our kitchen that evening or that late early morning hours in 1947. This is totally different.
The implication is that Major Marcel may have been ordered to take part in a cover-up that involved switching the material from Roswell for a common weather balloon. General Ramey and the Air Force now discounted their earlier press announcements that they had found a flying saucer. The story was officially dead. But back in Roswell, those who had reported the original story found that the military were behaving somewhat strangely over what they now claimed was merely a weather balloon. Frank Joyce had been the first to announce the original news on local radio station KGFL just a few hours earlier.
I got a phone call. Well, I got a number of phone calls, but the one that really got my attention was purportedly from the Pentagon. There was a young lady on the line saying, "Colonel so-and-so, this is the Pentagon calling." And this was within a few minutes of it going out on the wire. And the voice on the line says, "Who is this?" I tell him. He said, "You put that story on the air about the flying saucers?" And I mean, his voice was, you know, the type that really conveys menace and power. And I said, "Yes, I did." And he says, "You're going to get in a lot of trouble for this," or made some threatening comment. And I said, "Look, I'm a civilian. You can't talk to me this way. You can't treat me this way. You can't tell me what to do in stories I put on the air." And he says, "I'll show you what I can do." And bang, hung up the phone.
And the voice at the other end of the line showed exactly what he could do to the owner of the radio station.
I got a call from Washington from one of the offices of one of the senators saying, "Look, if you put out any stories on this thing, you're going to lose your license. And it's not going to be over a period of time. It's going to be the same day that we tell you that you're off the air."
Frankie Rowe, the fireman's daughter who had handled some material, had always regarded the Army Air Force in Roswell as friends of the town. But an unexpected visit from the military to her home would now cast them in a sinister new light.
He had this club, or stick, or whatever it was, and he was beating it on his hand. And he would hit it. Every time he would say something, he'd hit his hand. And he said, I want you to know you were never there. And I didn't understand what he meant, because I said, yes, I was. And he said, no, you weren't. I said, yes, I was. And he said, can't you get this through your head? You never saw anything. You were not there. You don't know anything. And he said, you know, this is a big desert out here. We can just take you out in the middle of this desert and no one will ever find your bodies. He said, you'll be nothing but bones and nobody will ever know what happened to you. And I told him I would not talk about it.
If it were not for the threats, the entire Roswell affair could be viewed as nothing more than an embarrassing mistake. But in 1965, Butch Blanchard, now a four-star general, attended a reunion dinner in Roswell, and the incident had not been forgotten.
He had been the commander here in 1947, and I was at a table with the general and several other locals when they were interrogating him about the 1947 incident. And he declined to answer any of the questions, except he did comment that it was the damnedest thing he'd ever seen.
He never would discuss it, but several months later, one night, I badgered him again, as I like to do, and he said, well, and he paused. He said, I'll tell you this, and I'm paraphrasing him because I don't remember exactly how he said it, but in essence he said, what I saw I've never seen before.
For 30 years, the Roswell incident remained a dark secret. Town and military maintained an uneasy silence. The story didn't see the light of day until 1978, when Jesse Marcel, the 509's intelligence officer, went public with an appearance on American television.
I was amazed as to what I saw. The amount of debris that was scattered over such an area. It took me a while to realize that there's something strange about it. But the more I saw the fragments, the more I realized that it wasn't anything that I was acquainted with. I proved I tried to burn it, it wouldn't burn. I tried to break it, it would not break. If it was something of ours, I'm sure there would be no reason to keep it under cover that long. It's an aerial spacecraft. There's another reason why it would not ever be known by anybody here until they found out more about it. I sensed that there was a cover-up someplace about this whole matter.
In 1947, General Ramey's chief of staff was Colonel Thomas DuBose. Shortly before he died, he was interviewed on home video. As a retired brigadier general, he is the highest-ranking officer ever to comment on the Roswell incident.
It was a cover story. The balloon part of it is the story that's to be given to the press, and that is it, and anything else, forget it. And McMullen, if you ever knew him, if you told him that he wanted to run something, he goddamn sure ran it. He knew every facet of the operation. He's a busybody. He wanted to know what the hell was going on, who was pissing on the sidewalk, and all that sort of thing.
General McMullen, deputy head of Strategic Air Command at the Pentagon, was in charge of the entire operation, according to General DuBose.
McMullen told me, you are not to discuss this, and this is a point of which this is more than top secret, as he said. It's beyond that. It's within my priority as deputy to George Kenney, and he in turn responsible to the president. This is the highest priority you can exist, and you will say nothing, and that's the end of it. And Jesus, that's from the commander-in-chief, and you forgot about it.
The revelations of DuBose suggest that the American Air Force did indeed have something important to hide.
There's no question about that. General DuBose said that specifically to us, that the balloon explanation that the Air Force offered was a cover story to get the reporters off General Ramey's back. So we have a wide body of testimony. There was a cover-up. We have military witnesses saying they were sworn to secrecy. We have radio employees telling us that they were told if they broadcast their interview with Mac Brazel, they better look for a new job because they'd be out of the radio business the next day. We can show that beyond a shadow of a doubt. There's no question there was a cover-up. The question is, what were they hiding?
What could the Air Force have been hiding for the last 40 years? One man who may hold the key to the mystery is Frank Kaufman. Kaufman claims that in 1947 he was a master sergeant in personnel at Roswell Army Airfield. But what was not known at the time, he says, is that he was also a covert member of a highly secret counterintelligence unit codenamed the Nine. Tonight, Kaufman reveals for the first time what he claims is the true story of the Roswell incident.
I was assigned to Roswell in 1942. My duties at that time was somewhat classified. The events that led up to the 1947 incident is rather peculiar because there was a lot of erratic movement on the radar screen. And this called our attention that maybe we better monitor those screens. They sent some of us to Alamogordo, the White Sands, to view the blips on the screens. The blips were just dancing from one end of the screen to the other, and then all of a sudden there was kind of a flash, and it just disappeared. Well, that indicated that possibly maybe a plane or a missile or something just went down.
Kaufman says he and his team immediately drove east from Alamogordo back to Roswell, then on towards a location about 35 miles south of the Foster Ranch.
And now this was late at night. We started to clip some of the wire fence and drove into the area. The terrain was very rough, and there was no roads leading into it. We saw this glow of light, just this kind of a halo of a light, just kind of beaming out. We got to, I guess, maybe 200 yards, maybe 300 yards from where it was. And we learned right then and there it wasn't a plane, it wasn't a missile, it was kind of a strange-looking craft that was embedded in the arroyo. The size of the craft, I would say possibly maybe around 20, 25 feet in length, and it was open and kind of halfway, and one body was thrown up against the wall of the arroyo. The other one was half in and half out of the craft. And when we got in close, we noticed that there were 3 others inside the craft. Then we radioed in back to the base to have a truck, a flatbed, and a crane and everything else just come out to the site. And we prepared everything to clear everything off.
Frank Kaufman provided us with what he claims is a copy of his official report on the Roswell incident, a top-secret document containing observations and sketches of what he saw at the time.
We saw panels of controls. We couldn't make them out. They were writings. We didn't know what it. We couldn't decipher it or anything of that nature. And the underbelly of the craft had a series of cells, quartz-type cells, sort of glass-looking cells, Arctic in shape.
This is the actual site where Kaufman says he saw the strange craft for the first time. This is an artist's impression of the aliens, based on Kaufman's own descriptions.
We noticed one thing, that deterioration was beginning to set in on one of the bodies of the hand. We noticed the skin kind of shrivel up, and that's the reason why we put them in the bags real in a hurry and got them out to the base hospital. They called the mortuary here to find out if there was anything that they could preserve the bodies with.
The base also inquired about the availability of child-sized coffins, and later there was another call to the town undertaker.
And I received a call later from the same mortuary officer stating that what the embalming fluids contained consisted of what would it do to the blood contents, what would it do to tissues, stomach contents, and how would it alter it. And I informed him what the answers that he wanted.
Glenn Dennis had the ambulance contract to ferry any injured servicemen to the base. That same day, he took an airman to the hospital there and was amazed to find himself being roughly escorted off the base by military police, who told him he had no right to be there.
As they were taking me out, there was a door that was open over to the left, and there was a nurse coming out that had a towel over a portion of her face, and she looked up and she recognized me, and she said, "Glenn, get out of here. Get out of here as fast as you can. You're going to get in a lot of trouble." Then the next morning, she called me about 10 o'clock or so and said that she would like to see me, that we had to talk. And so I met her out at the officers' club that morning. And she was already there when I arrived at the officers' club. She was very upset, still crying, very hysterical. Then she told me what happened about going into this room. These doctors were there, and there was some 2 hospital gurneys there with the crash bags. One crash bag was 2 very small mutilated bodies. The other one, there was a very small body in a crash bag, but hadn't been mutilated as much as the others. And she told me the reason what they wouldn't let her out because they wanted her to write down what they were examining. And that's what she was doing. And they all became very ill. They said that the smell, and it was a very toxic smell, and they just couldn't breathe and get their breath, and they had to get out.
This is Hangar 84, and this is where the craft and the bodies were actually brought into this hangar. But there was a lot of activity in this area here. And inside the hangar, right above on top, there was this large spotlight with this shining down on the craft, and also the bodies were laid out. There were 5 of them. And there was a cordon of military police around the area to keep people getting too close.
There were other witnesses to the strange events at Hangar 84.
I had security clearance, so I told him came over there to pick up Lieutenant Governor Joe Montoya. He was at the hangar.
Joe Montoya, Lieutenant Governor of New Mexico, was at the base campaigning for re-election. Outside Hangar 84, Ruben Anaya was waiting to pick him up.
So the APs just lead us over there, you know, and then, but they didn't park close to the hangar. They park about a half a block away. And I says, what the hell's going on, you know? And then, when they went over I moved a little closer, and that's when the big hangar was open, and Senator Montoya came out. He says, let's get the hell out of here. He says.
When he come out of there, he come out scared, and he said they saw 2 little men with a big head. But one was alive, still alive. They had him laying down on the floor, and he come out and told us that both was there, and one was still alive.
There were other witnesses with strange reports of aliens. Fireman Dan Dwyer told his daughter Frankie what he had seen.
He said it did not come from this world. Did not look like anything he had ever seen. And he said there were little people out there. And Mother asked him what he meant by little people, and he said they weren't human people, but they were little people. He said there were 2 that were already dead when they got there, and they were put into body bags. And I don't know if the one that was still alive had put them into the bags or if someone assisted at the time. There was one that was still alive and was walking around.
At the sheriff's office, Sheriff Wilcox's wife later told her daughter what he said had really happened.
She said that there was a flying saucer and that they even found some bodies by it, and one of them was alive, and that the Army, Air Force had come and threatened my father and his family to not mention anything at all about it.
According to Frank Kaufman, the debris and bodies were flown to Air Force Intelligence Headquarters at Wright Field. And another consignment was sent to Andrews Air Force Base in Washington.
How high did it go?
All the way to the president, I was told. President Truman.
The fact is, there is no proof, evidence, documentation, physical evidence of any sort to prove that your story is true.
That's right. You have to accept it. I mean, you either believe it or you don't. I mean, see.
There is no independent evidence to corroborate Frank Kaufman's story. Proving his involvement in clandestine operations, he claims, would be in breach of his military oath. The lack of tangible evidence has been a consistent feature of the Roswell incident. But early in 1995, sensational film, allegedly shot by an American military cameraman, appeared in London.
Our cameraman says that the crash happened in June. He was sent down to White Sands on the 2nd of June, 1947, and that they'd spent a week and a half clearing up the area. He also explains that when they first arrived at the site, the area had been cordoned off, and no one went anywhere near the vehicle. The ground surrounding the vehicle was hot. He said the creatures were all laying by the side, holding onto these oblong boxes, which they wouldn't let go. And after a few hours, when the military moved in, the instruction was to move away all the loose debris and the creatures.
Ray Santilli claims he negotiated for 2 years to buy this film. He's the only person who knows the identity of the cameraman who shot it. According to Santilli, the poor quality is explained by the circumstances under which it was photographed.
When he tells you that the camera had no zoom facility, when he tells you that he was wearing the same outfit as the surgeons, and when he says that these cameras had a fixed focus, and that, when they moved in, that then there was no way of controlling the focus, and it was possibly he was steaming up inside the costumes, and he was trying to operate the cameras to the best of his ability. You just have to accept it. But the other question is, well, why isn't it a fixed camera? Why isn't it a camera fixed above looking at the body? But then his argument is that, well, surgeons were bending over it all the time, and the only way you can get to see these things is by moving around. And the camera that he detailed as using, we checked at the museum, and, it's a handheld camera.
Despite repeated requests, Ray Santilli has been unable to arrange a meeting between us and the cameraman. So far, we have no real proof of his existence. The Air Force categorically deny the existence of spacecraft and aliens. But mounting pressure from the public and a determined congressman forced the Pentagon to launch their own investigation. In July 1994, their official report admitted for the first time that the original weather balloon story was in fact a lie, designed to cover up what had really crashed at Roswell, a balloon of a different kind. This is film of Project Mogul, a top-secret project designed to detect sound waves from Soviet atomic tests. The Air Force report states that Project Mogul offers the most likely explanation for the Roswell incident.
I suspect that our Flight 4 on the 4th of June was probably the source of the debris that the Ranger found. It was not recovered and the record indicates that the B-17 abandoned tracking it while it was still airborne, and it's my memory that it was over a little town called Arabella, just north of Capitan and about 17 miles from where some debris was later found.
Curiously, an examination of the actual flight logs of the time reveals that there is no record of the existence of Flight Number 4 on the 4th of June, the one the Air Force claims explains the Roswell incident. Moore says no record exists as no data was entered for unsuccessful flights, yet other flights that were unsuccessful are clearly documented. Discrepancies such as these have led many to doubt the Air Force's insistence that Project Mogul is in fact the answer to the Roswell mystery. On Capitol Hill, the representative for New Mexico, Congressman Stephen Schiff, is suspicious of the number of different explanations offered over the years.
We've had 3 different explanations from the military about what crashed. The first explanation is it was flying disc, meaning flying saucer in today's terminology. They changed that and said, we made a mistake. It wasn't a flying disc, it was a weather balloon. I still find it amazing that the United States top bomber wing, with the only wing that was eligible to carry nuclear weapons at that particular time, would not know a weather balloon from a flying saucer, but apparently somebody didn't, according to them. So we then had the second explanation that this was a weather balloon, and we now have the third explanation that this was part of a highly classified radiation detection experiment. So we have 3 separate explanations as to what crashed, but no dispute that something crashed.
If it wasn't a balloon, what did crash at Roswell? A flying saucer or something else? And how does the controversial Alien film relate to the Roswell mystery? New Mexico is the most secret state in the Union. Historically, its deserts and skies have been the center for more highly classified and secret scientific projects than any other place on Earth. The suspicion is that some strange, top-secret military experiment could lie behind the Roswell mystery. 50 years ago, the first atomic bomb was detonated in the Trinity test near White Sands. This summer, stealth warplanes were still on test flights in skies above New Mexico. And almost half a century earlier, their predecessor, the Flying Wing, was also seen in these skies. In 1947, White Sands was the location where America developed its early missile technology, with V-2 rockets captured from the Nazis. German scientists were brought here at the end of the war to develop the first stage of America's space program. Werner von Braun, the inventor of the V-2, was in charge of the operation. It is known that animal experiments were part of the American space program in the 1950s. But could there have been any as early as 1947?
One series, which was known as Project Albert, which launched a chimpanzee or a monkey, a small monkey, in one of the nose cones. Needless to say, the monkey didn't survive due to some technical difficulties with the nose cone re-entering into the Earth's atmosphere.
When was that?
That was probably around the late 40s and the early 50s. And this was even before the famous Ham, the space chimpanzee, which was trained over at the Alamogordo Air Force Base.
Could it have been as early as 1947?
Probably around 1947. I know that Project Albert began with, I believe, V2 number 47.
Our investigation reveals that animal experiments may have been conducted much earlier than was previously thought. If so, then could the Roswell incident have been some highly secret experiment that went catastrophically wrong? Is it possible that a V-2 rocket with animals on board could have gone astray and may account for the descriptions of bodies and strange debris offered by so many witnesses at Roswell? Could the metal with the curious properties of the Foster Ranch have come from a crashed V-2?
We have researched our records extensively, and on that specific date and time, and even that month, we had nothing that could conceivably be within that area. We had been launching some balloons, but nothing in that particular month when the crash at Roswell occurred. And all of our rockets that we did launch could be accounted for during that time period. And there was nothing that White Sands had available at that time that could reach that far over to Roswell. As far as White Sands is concerned, we're pretty clean on this incident.
If the military authorities are to be believed, the records rule out the possibility of a crashed V-2. But the military admitted lying before to cover up something more secret. It is this possibility which leads many to believe that the cover-up continues. And, according to Ray Santilli, the cameraman of the alleged alien autopsy seems to offer a tantalizing clue.
They're not alien creatures as far as he's concerned. He just calls the creatures freaks all the time. He says they've got no reason to be here, and he says he doesn't know what they are. Our cameraman's a very religious guy. He just refuses to believe. And he was there at the time. He saw everything that happened, but he refuses to believe that these are extraterrestrials. He just says that, you know, it's just some goddamn experiment, and that's it. You know, he just calls them freaks. You have to remember, this is a cameraman that was there at White Sands, at the Trinity experiments as well. It appears that lots of weird and wonderful things happened at that time.
As well as the autopsy, there is footage of strange debris allegedly recovered at the site of a crashed space vehicle. Whatever the Santilli film represents, there is no question it demands serious investigation. These cryptic symbols bear some resemblance to actual letters. V-I-D-E-O. Video. Despite doubts about its authenticity, we took the film to America to show to some of the witnesses that we originally interviewed about the Roswell incident.
The symbols are vaguely consistent with my memory, since I can't be absolutely sure though, but they certainly could be consistent with what I saw. The differences would be the size and the fact that the ones I saw were not raised above the level of the beam.
I'm trying to count fingers in there. Let's see, that's 6. I don't recall 6 fingers, though. I don't know. I won't swear to it, John. I don't recall those 6 fingers, to be honest with you. It doesn't look too close to the Roswell incident. I can say that much.
Dr. Ian West is one of Britain's leading forensic pathologists. He is frequently called upon by Scotland Yard in murder investigations.
The blood pattern is unusual. You don't normally get, that incision has been open for some time now. We've got 4 little trails running from it. Although we have a number of quite distinct linear trails, dark trails, which look like blood trails, they're not of the nature that I would expect to see at post-mortem. I would see some more smearing, some more irregularity in the blood loss from the margins of the incision. One has seen one distinctive organ removed from the upper central abdominal region. It's of the size of a liver, but it's not of the liver shape, and it's not in the liver position. I've seen no intestines that I can distinguish. I can't distinguish the thoracic organ. It certainly doesn't resemble, from what one can see here, any human remains that I've ever seen. There's just no evidence to say this is definitely nothing on the film which makes me say this is definitely a hoax. My feeling is that probably about 98% is that this is probably a man-made hoax. I have, as I say, a 2% area where I don't know.
In my opinion, I think it's a special effect. It's man-made. It's a good special effect. It's not going to be a cheap item. It's going to be, a few $100,000 probably. it's difficult to say when something like that could have been made. Certainly in the 60s they were doing things at Hammer, which were very similar. I would guess that it was not before the 60s, but sort of mid-60s I would think would be the earliest it could be. I don't think anyone can be certain that it's a special effect. I mean, it's how do I know what the inside of aliens looks like? No one knows. I know what the inside of foam rubber and polyurethane foam looks like, and it looks very similar.
Many people who are deeply suspicious about the film think that you could be behind the hoax yourself. What have you got to say to that?
I'll still go back to what I said before. If someone, even if it was our company, wanted to hoax a piece of footage, why not do the job properly? Why not create something that really looks like an alien creature? You know, why come up with something where you've got these unnecessary hurdles of saying, well, is it human or is it not human? And in answer to your question, we didn't hoax it.
Are you sure?
Absolutely sure. 100% sure. I think, you know.
As of this moment, there is no conclusive evidence to prove that the film is either genuine or a hoax. Establishing its provenance is a critical factor in moving the Roswell mystery closer to resolution. One vital step would be to have the film chemically analyzed by a photographic laboratory.
Are you going to provide proper film extract which can be properly tested by Kodak, which has proper images on it?
I'll provide you with a film. I'll provide you with what I can, which will be a film with image, and the only way that I can do that is by securing some film from the collector that bought the first autopsy, which is currently en route to us.
So far, no suitable film extract has been provided for laboratory tests to determine the year of exposure and processing, but we continue to press for it. In Washington, the search for tangible evidence of what happened at Roswell has continued on a different front.
The issue is providing to the public whatever records may still exist, if any, and there may not be any, but if any, on the Roswell incident, so people can make their own determination. That is the mission that I discussed with the General Accounting Office.
The General Accounting Office is a powerful body which oversees government operations. They have been investigating government agencies to establish if there are any official records of the Roswell incident. In July this year, the GAO reported that the Air Force had destroyed their records relating to Roswell. But one man who would know if Roswell ever figured in secret files is Frederick Durant. In 1952, he investigated the whole question of flying saucers for the CIA.
If there had happened in 47, we would have known about it in 52 or 53 when I was involved. And I truly believe that we had the best information available in the intelligence community, including the White House and the National Security Council. And the investigation would certainly have, in fact, it was not even considered in the Blue Book because it was meteorological balloon wreckage.
But you are absolutely convinced that what you have told us, what you saw, and that is 100% accurate?
I am absolutely 101,000%. It's the truth.
The whole truth, nothing but the truth?
That's right. As Ripley would say, believe it or not.
For nearly 50 years, the Roswell incident has defied all attempts at rational explanation. In the absence of any physical evidence, it all comes down to a question of faith. Roswell has become the most celebrated of all UFO mysteries. In the course of our investigations, we have encountered a wilderness of fact and fantasy, where credible witnesses with apparent sincerity relate incredible tales, and incredible characters make outlandish claims that cast grave doubts on their own rationality. But could so many ordinary people from the rural heartland of America be lying, or afflicted by a false memory syndrome that leads to such similar accounts of the same story?
Find that the people who are telling you these stories are very ordinary Americans.
I know it happened. I know it was real. The threats were real.
I think that they're covered up some, and I think they should tell the truth to the public now.
Today, the Roswell incident still remains shrouded in mystery. The Air Force insists that there are simply no secrets to conceal. Yet, in a final twist, a source close to the Pentagon informed us that secret documents have now come to light, and that in the next few months, a new report will explain the mysterious accounts of strange bodies. It is just possible that the riddle of the Roswell incident may yet turn out to be a cosmic Watergate.
General Ramey describes the object as being of flimsy construction, almost like a box type. He says that it was so battered that he was unable to determine whether it had a disc form, and he does not indicate its size. Ramey says that so far as can be determined, no one saw the object in the air, and he describes it as being made of some sort of tin foil. Other Army officials